The member for Deakin.
Well, thanks very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It does give me great pleasure to rise on this bill, if for nothing else that the member for Moreton has ceased that tirade. And to the members of the public in the gallery, I apologise, because what you've seen is the worst example of Australian politics. If you were up there in the gallery drifting in and out of consciousness as that tirade went on, you'd be convinced that the member for Moreton would end his contribution by saying, "And I oppose this bill because it's so bad, and I've spent 15 minutes talking about how bad this bill is." But no, he will support this bill. You heard 15 minutes of a contribution on a bill that he supports, believe it or not. So I'm glad that... imagine if he disliked it. Imagine if he disliked it. I tell you what, he's got fire in the belly. But I say to all of them, as members of the public in the gallery, thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for hanging in there. What we saw from the member for Moreton was a continuation of Labor's denial. The denial that over their 6 years of government we have seen a budgetary position that's now in a ruinous position. The words of Wayne Swan. A government that says we did for small business what no government's done before, but all they did was increase regulations by 21,000. But there's nothing wrong with that, nothing to see here. In the member for Moreton's worldview or view of those last 6 years, there's nothing to see here. We were a great government and there was no problems. So fundamentally, it's an example that the Labor Party just have not learned their lesson. The member for Moreton also goes on to say, that today's bill and all of our repeal days are just that we've turned up for work today, and this is what governments do. Does he not see the great irony when he says that the clear inference is that for 6 years the Rudd, Gillard and Rudd governments didn't turn up for work and didn't do what governments are supposed to do? Because if that was the case, why did regulations increase by 21,000, strangling small businesses in this country? And every time he says there's no problem, there's nothing to see here, he absolutely condemns all of the small business owners in my electorate who have said to me that for many years, and it got so much worse under the Rudd, Gillard, Rudd governments, that they are being strangled in regulation and costly red tape. Having grown up in a small business family myself, I saw firsthand the costs of red tape. It's not just a theoretical exercise that we discuss in this House. My parents, and I have very vivid memories of growing up, seeing my parents until all hours of the night, sitting at their desks, filling out paperwork. So they'd be at work during the day, 6 o'clock in the morning they'd get up and go to work. They'd get home at probably 7 or 8 o'clock at night, try and enjoy some time with the family, and then get started on the paperwork at 10 or 11 o'clock for a couple of hours. This has a real impact on people's lives. So when the member for Moreton and member for Fraser and member for Isaac sit there absolutely whinging and moaning about today's bill and then voting for it, just suggests to me they have no understanding of small business and no desire to engage with the government on this task that we are trying to achieve of, for the first time in many decades, actually reducing the regulatory burden that the Australian government imposes on our citizens. And I'm not so surprised from the member for Fraser and the member for Isaacs, two sort of academic bookworm types who probably have absolutely no idea about small business. But the member for Moreton, I think I expected a bit more, and unfortunately was left wanting. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do want to get to explaining some of the substance of the bill in front of us, the Treasury Legislation Amendment Repeal Day Bill 2014, which implements a range of improvements to Australia's laws and, as we've been talking about, removes costly and unnecessary red tape. The government does recognise that while some degree of regulation is of course necessary, bad regulation and too much regulation hurts productivity, it deters innovation and investment, and that ultimately costs jobs. There's a real-life dimension to the issues we're discussing today. The member for Fraser, in a sort of a nasty, snide way, sort of has a go at us for our Coalition Deregulatory Task Force, which I'm a member of and is ably led by the member for Kooyong and my friend. But the whole purpose of the Coalition Deregulatory Task Force, of which I was the Victorian member, was to give members of parliament an opportunity to bring real-life examples from our electorates, so on the front line, not theoretical examples or examples from big business or peak bodies, but actually examples of where the interface between a small business and government is causing issues for constituents of ours. And I found the process extraordinarily worthwhile, and a number of fantastic outcomes have been achieved by that task force. So I want to congratulate again the member for Kooyong for leading that, and it was a privilege to be a part of it. But it is a whole-of-government approach. Our task force was quite a minute part of that, because we've set up in every department specific deregulation teams to search for those deregulatory changes that we can make in each and every portfolio. This obviously led to our holding of the first two repeal days. And we said before the election that we would repeal $1 billion of red tape each year. After our second 2014 repeal day, that came in at a net reduction of $2.1 billion in compliance costs. And it's quite a complex, there's quite a complex process when determining that $2.1 billion reduction. But what I would say is the flow-on benefits of a $2.1 billion reduction in red tape goes into many, many, many billions of dollars. The multiplier effect is quite phenomenal. And ultimately, we want to make it easier for businesses and individuals to get on and spend their precious energy on what they do best, and that's improving their bottom line, creating a better life for their family, and also for creating more jobs. And particularly in the small business sector, I can tell you now, employees are more like family than employees. And there's nothing better than a successful small business that can have their employees grow with them, develop with them, and share in hopefully the spoils of what is a successful small business. So if this bill helps that process in any way, I think in this House it would be much more gracious of people like the member for Moreton, who is a friend of mine, but it would be much more gracious of people like the member for Moreton to get up and say, I support this bill, I support it for these reasons, and if you can only talk for a couple of minutes, that's fine. Talk for 2 minutes. But to go on a 15-minute tirade, absolutely pillaring the bill and then concluding by saying, and I commend the bill to the House, I mean, that's embarrassing. And it's the worst feature of Australian politics. Australians, and I remember when I was a private citizen, you'd sort of sit there and you'd want to grab the TV screen and just say you agree with this. There's enough going on in this House that members opposite can get an opportunity to try and whack us for. But where we agree, let's just agree and move on. I think it was a very ungracious contribution. But the bill before us today contains a number of features that other speakers have gone into much more detail than I will, but I think for completeness I just want to cover off on them. Schedule 1 repeals the payslip reporting provisions in the SIS Act that increases the regulatory burden on employers beyond what is currently imposed under the Fair Work legislation. So I think the changes which have been spoken about by other members just remove some duplication in reporting what superannuation contributions have been made, and I think it's relatively uncontroversial and makes sense. Schedule 2 to the bill, something quite close to my heart, is a range of changes that simplify the tax laws by consolidating duplicated tax administration provisions, and it also bundles in a whole lot of tax acts into a single set of provisions. And I can say I was one of those unfortunate people in the tax profession in my former life as a tax lawyer, trying to juggle with half a dozen different acts, with certain provisions that were cross-referenced into an entirely different act. And I think, if you put all of the tax acts that I had to deal with on a daily basis, on a set of scales, they weighed, something like 6 or 8 kilos. It's quite extraordinary. So anything we can do to achieve what I hope is an ultimate outcome of a single tax act, which we was started in in the mid-90s, and we sort of got half the way there, but never actually concluded it. This is good news. So I think Schedule 2 is definitely a standout feature of this bill for me. Schedule 3 to the bill amends the Financial Sector Shareholdings Act, which I think makes some sensible changes around associate tests and reporting for associates who may or may not have an interest in a company that a particular individual may. These sort of associate tests are often there for really good reasons and to ensure that we avoid collusion and conflicts of interest. But here I'm quite convinced that the changes proposed don't end up with a diminution of any protections. It just removes what is, I think, quite a redundant sort of rule. Schedule 4 rewrites the definition of Australia into a single location in the tax law. And I've actually, over the last few weeks, heard lots of members opposite deriding this change. Look, we shouldn't overstate it, but I can tell you right now, having multiple definitions in different tax acts cross-referenced against each other is extraordinarily difficult for any type of understanding of the tax law. And my clients, anything we can do to ensure that Australian taxpayers, who I dealt with, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, who I dealt with on a very regular basis, anything we can do to make their tax affairs easier, it should be applauded in this House and should not be derided. So rewriting the current definition of Australia, I think, is outstanding. Ultimately, I want to conclude by saying that I think our approach is working. The approach here is working. What we are doing when we discuss legislation like today, what we are doing when we have our repeal day is we are saying to the public, we have a determination from the Prime Minister down to the humblest backbencher to make your life easier in any way we can. And I welcomed the words of Jennifer Westacott, the CEO of the Business Council of Australia, where she put it quite succinctly. And she said, and I quote, "Finally, we've reached a turning point in dealing with the high costs and inefficiencies faced by business and individuals in Australia every single day." And I think that's right. I think for too many years now we've accepted that a government or a new minister or a new government, they want to put their touch on a particular policy area, and so we just load on and we pile on more regulations. In contrast, this government has said, we want to get out of your life to the greatest extent possible. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and remove necessary regulations for protections of our citizens, but we don't want to wedge ourselves into your life where it's unnecessary. So I want to say to my electorate, the people of Deakin, that whilst this is not particularly sexy stuff, I can assure you we're doing the hard work behind the scenes to make your life easier, to make it easier for you to grow your businesses, grow employment opportunities for your employees, which will hopefully mean greater opportunities for your children as well. So I therefore commend the bill to the House and again congratulate everybody for the wonderful work in this space. Thank you.